unfortunately, times have changed. So we have more and more privacy laws getting passed every year. We have more and more bills that are passed. And all of these bills require businesses to have a privacy policy and have very, very specific disclosures within that policy. So, a lot of people will assume, oh, privacy policy, just random information in there that some lawyer came up with, legalese. But, technically, while that is true, privacy policies need to have the specific disclosures required by the laws that apply to you.
Hey everyone, welcome to the High Level Podcast Spotlight Sessions. We have an episode jam-packed with what you need to know and be aware of as you're jumping into this journey of serving businesses using High Level or serving customers or their customers being served using your white label version of High Level. On these Spotlight Sessions, we like to grab the attention of experts in our ecosystem and those that have a connection with High Level in some way, shape, or form, whether their family uses High Level or they have an account with High Level through their company. We've been blessed to have an opportunity here to chat with Donata Stroink-Skillrud. She's an attorney licensed in Illinois and a certified information privacy professional. As the president and legal engineer of Termageddon, LLC, also a SaaS company responsible for generating and updating tens of thousands of website policies. For my techies, the fun stuff. And for my sales pros, the stuff that doesn't make you the money right away, but keeps the money in your pocket. Without further ado, help me give a high-level warm welcome to Donata. She's a leading expert on data privacy, and she's going to spend some time with us to educate us on what we need to be aware of, a little bit more context around her experience and her expertise. She's also the chair of the American Bar Association's e-Privacy Committee. She serves on the American Bar Association's Cybersecurity Legal Task Force and represents the American Bar Association at the United Nations. She's been recognized numerous times for her contributions to the legal field, and Donata is a fellow of the American Bar Foundation. Donata, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. Really excited to talk about privacy. I guess having a lawyer on the show, I do want to say I'm not providing legal advice today, but I'm happy to share some general knowledge and some great insights with you.
Now you beat me to it. You beat me to the fun stuff. I've been practicing on how I was going to tee that up, and you just took my thunder away, but I'm okay with it. Because I know the value that you're going to share with our audience here is some serious stuff. And I want to say, because we could add humor and fun all together, but this is serious stuff. And I don't want to buzzkill here the episode, but it's serious stuff. And I want to just kind of pivot here briefly. Could you explain to me and the audience what attracted you to this industry, and specifically e-privacy and privacy, and it takes a certain focus for that to stay on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess going back before we started this company, my first introduction to privacy in general was I got a letter from Target saying that, hey, you had a credit card with us and that data has been breached. And I remember being really young and not understanding what that means. They have my credit card data. Do I close this card now? What does this letter mean? It has all this jargon. I don't understand what's going on. So that was my very first introduction to it. And after law school, I was in private practice, and I actually worked with a lot of agencies, helping them write contracts and stuff. And I also had clients who had websites, and they would ask me, hey, do I need a privacy policy or terms of service on this website? What do I do here? And I'm like, sure, I can write this up for you. It's no problem. And this was before all the complicated privacy laws that we know today, even before GDPR. And I would ask them very similar questions like, what personal information are you collecting? What do you do with it? Who do you share it with? And then I had like 10 templates that I would Frankenstein together into one document. And to be honest with you, I hated the process. It was really repetitive. A lot of my clients couldn't afford my services. And I thought, hey, there should be a way to automate this. And on the other side, my husband, who I was dating at the time, had his own agency, and his clients would ask him, hey, can you copy and paste my competitor's privacy policy and put it on my website? Or do you have a template that I can use? And he's like, well, I'm not really comfortable doing these things. I don't really understand this. I'm not a lawyer. And we were sharing this over dinner one night, and we're like, hey, we should come up with something that solves both of our problems. And that's how Termageddon was born.
So cool. Usually, you imagine like the most boring story around it, but it sounded like this should be like on a Netflix agency love story. Like, I loved how the fact that you guys were dating at the time, he was a geek, you were patient enough to deal with his journey. Because,
Yes.
I mean, you could probably write a book about dating an agency owner to now marrying one, right? Like,
Yes.
that's a whole series of chapters. But the seriousness came out of it when he realized that it wasn't something right to do, and then you were already in that space, and thank goodness like the light turned on because people do what you just said all the time.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to get deep into this, and we're going to really give some actionable items and some awareness. And I know that when I had shared about you jumping on here, can we mention your business name? You're like really more of an information giver. If it's okay with you, I'm gonna share how people could find you because there are a lot of companies to choose from, and not all companies are created equal. And I know you're gonna give some insight to people are gonna look for you and try to Google you, and then I'd rather than just have a direct way to get a hold of you, if as long as you're okay with that. But more importantly, could you share a little bit around the importance of doing this right the first time and what you potentially avoid if doing it right. Like instead of just copying and pasting or it looking good, how does this stuff really like how can this switch in an hour based on a notification?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think going back to the very basics, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So websites collect personally identifiable information. Sometimes we call this personal information, PII, personal data. And that's things like names, emails, phone numbers, IP addresses, things like that. So if you have a contact form, email newsletter sign up form, if you have analytics, if you have advertising, your website is collecting PII. Now, privacy laws protect that PII. So it doesn't matter that people submit this PII to you voluntarily, that you're not collecting like social security numbers or fingerprints. This information that's regularly collected by websites is protected by privacy laws. Now, these laws don't really care about where your business is located. It's more about where your customers are located, who's submitting the PII to your website, who's being tracked, to whom you're offering goods or services online, and things like that. And I do want to note that privacy laws can apply to small businesses. So it doesn't necessarily matter, how much revenue you're making, how many employees you have, how much data you're collecting, or anything like that. So, it's something that everybody needs to keep in mind, even nonprofits. And if you do this incorrectly, there are certain consequences that can take place. So, for example, fines start at $2,500 per violation. Per violation means per individual whose privacy rights were infringed upon. So let's say I have 100 people from California that go to my website. They get tracked through Google Analytics. I can get fined 2,500 times 100. That's how that fine is calculated. And also businesses can get sued under certain privacy laws as well. And we'll kind of talk about that later too. And for agencies that are or website owners that, have been in business for a long time, you may be thinking, well, 10 years ago, this wasn't a big deal. Well, unfortunately, times have changed. So we have more and more privacy laws getting passed. Every year, we have more and more bills that are passed. And all of these bills require businesses to have a privacy policy and have very, very specific disclosures within that policy. So a lot of people will assume, oh, privacy policy, just random information in there that some lawyer came up with, legalese. But, technically, while that is true, privacy policies need to have the specific disclosures required by the laws that apply to you. And then lastly, in response to your question, I do want to say that it's not just all about fines and lawsuits. throughout the last several years, we've actually seen how privacy can be a competitive advantage to businesses as well. So there's been a couple really great studies that came out. So one study found that 7 in 10 Canadians.
I'm going to interrupt you on that one because
Yeah.
that's the goods. That's the goods. And I want to just make sure here, typically I'll get right into the subsection topic, but I feel like, sometimes let me give you a little background here. From what I hear from our listeners, they're listening to this on the drive. They're listening to this in the gym. They're listening to this while they're away from the computer, right? This is their time to hear folks that are sharing either their winning tactics or how they're using the software. And I just wanted, because this stuff can be a little bit overwhelming and could create this anxiety that people just push away from. So I wanted just to kind of, hook them in on the seriousness of this. But I know, prior to us jumping on here, we spoke how in depth we were going to go and that there not enough time in the day, let alone in 45 minutes to go over everything. So we're going to leave some information in the link below on how that people can find you. But more importantly, we crafted this topic for our audience here, and we are live right now. So comment below what questions you have. Feel free to jot those questions on, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you're at. But today's topic is why agencies should talk to their clients about privacy. Now, this isn't solely about you. What we're going to go over here to be used for your business, but this is why you as an agency, marketer, at whatever level, as long as you're serving, accepting money for the business, or even volunteering your time, you should be talking to your clients about privacy. And we're going to go over three major topics here. The first one is the importance of privacy compliance. The second one is common website privacy pitfalls. And the third is protecting your agency, but also using the privacy either as a product or a way to position additional expertise. And we'll go in depth on these topics here. Thank you for your patience, Donata, but also just going in depth right off the bat, because I believe it's so important that people know that this can either, one, hurt them personally, because they're personally held liable, to hurt their business and their customers and everyone around them. So let's jump into the first topic here, if you're okay with this, and feel free to pivot as needed. The importance of privacy compliance. Could you help us unpack this more of an open-ended question, and then we can kind of navigate through those trenches?
Sure. So I think a couple things with why privacy compliance is important. So the first item would be that it's regulated, right? So you have all these privacy laws that regulate personally identifiable information, and the consequence of not following those is potential fines or lawsuits. And then kind of on a more positive side, it is a competitive advantage, meaning that consumers are caring more and more about privacy than they have ever before. And they're taking action to change their habits due to privacy practices. So, like before the study in Canada, where 7 in 10 Canadians have refused to provide their personal information to a company over privacy concerns. So if they go to the website, they don't see a privacy policy, or maybe they don't see a cookie consent banner, or they see that you're selling data, they can refuse to fill out a form and inquire about services or products. Over in the US side, 94% of Americans would switch to a company that prioritizes privacy. So, if everything else is similar, they will go to a company that is taking privacy more seriously. And then about half of Americans in a particular study would not use products or services that they believe have privacy issues. So this means that, if your product or service has a privacy issue, they may go to a different company that's providing a similar product or service.
So I just want to put my personal consumer hat on. I do a lot of shopping. I use incognito mode at times. I get these notifications for cookies. Sometimes I just click accept. Sometimes I click the settings button and then I uncheck. It all depends on, right, how fast I need the information and what device I'm on. But I've also have never seen many of these marketing company websites have all those bells and whistles. Could you break down, I guess, what is a minimum or do the best you can, right? As a general statement here, without it being considered legal advice. Could you point us in the right direction on like what do I need to turn on or what do I need to make sure is a standard for my clients? And do those standards change based on if they're product or service, home services, and how much do I have to include in those policies outside of right what I'm offering, maybe the website or the technology end of things? I know I just do a lot at you, but feel free to unpack what's possible.
Sure, absolutely. So I think, first of all, the requirements that your clients are subject to will depend on the privacy laws that apply to them. So each website may have different compliance requirements. I think for agencies, the first thing to remember is that your client should be complying with these things and not you. So your client should be the ones that are providing you with a privacy policy, providing you with the cookie consent banner that they want to use, not you as the agency. So you really want to make sure that you're not the one that is responsible for this, the client is. And I think we'll talk more about that later. Now, in terms of the privacy policy, any website that collects personally identifiable information needs to have a privacy policy. Now, what is included in that privacy policy will depend on the privacy laws that apply to the client. So each law has a very different set of disclosures that it requires these policies to make, and they're usually not overlapping. So that's something that can get increasingly complicated depending on the compliance needs. In terms of the cookie consent banner, not every single website needs that. So you'll only need that if the website's collecting cookies and the privacy laws that require the website to have one apply to them. So great example, California Invasion of Privacy Act. If you're using any tools that track residents of California, like Google Analytics, Metapixel, you will need to have the cookie consent banner. And the standard there is that all non-essential cookies are turned off by default. So that means cookies like Google Analytics, Metapixel, things like that, don't track the user until they specifically accept those cookies. And the importance here is that the design of the banner cannot be deceptive. So that means that it needs to have an accept and a decline button. So if your banner just says okay or just accept, it's not compliant. It needs to have accept and decline.
So if I'm an agency owner and I'm looking, put my sales hat on now, and I'm in the East Coast and I'm looking to target businesses to do business with, to serve, to help grow. I'm the West Coast and I like it because of the 3 hour or 4 hour time difference. That time could help me here either early or afternoon, however it works, but I'm thinking at it from that way. I'm not thinking of it any other way. This is almost like a warning. Whatever way you think it, California has strict rules, and there are people policing it.
Yes, absolutely.
Can we talk about the policing part of it? And without, again, giving, just an understanding, is this something that, attorneys are just looking to find a trip? Is this more of, there's cookies and these internet bumpers that are out there, right? Like, can you help us understand what we need to be aware of in order to make this educated, right, pivot?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think enforcement will depend on the state or the country. So for example, in the European Union, they have data protection authorities, which are authorities specifically set up to enforce privacy laws. In most US states, that responsibility falls to the Attorney General of the state. So, but taking California as a specific example, so California has three laws that are in play. So one is the California Invasion of Privacy Act, which prohibits tracking without consent. So that one is actually enforced through lawsuits. So this means that there are dozens of law firms out there that are suing businesses directly based on these violations. So you would first get a demand letter saying, hey, this is how you violated this law, pay us X amount of money or we're going to sue you. And then usually if you don't pay, you get the lawsuit and go to court. The second law is the California Online Privacy and Protection Act. That's enforced by the state's attorney general. And then the third law is the California Privacy Rights Act, which is enforced by the California Privacy Protection Agency, which is an agency that has been specifically set up for privacy law enforcement. And actually, a lot of states are doing this now. So they're finding that the Attorney General's office doesn't necessarily have the time to enforce privacy laws because they're responsible for consumer protection across their state, a lot of laws, a lot of different violations. So they're forming separate teams within that office just to handle privacy. So for example, they just did that in Texas recently.
I'm starting to get the goosebumps, and because I never, getting a letter, right? And people are getting letters, people are getting notifications. That could put you at a very like a shocking moment. I know there's a lot of fraud out there, and there's a lot of people that take advantage of these situations. Is there a process if somebody were to receive a demand letter? Is there a vetting process? Is there something that you recommend to just make sure that we're taking the appropriate steps and not ignoring it, not assuming it's fraud? How do we go about, or is there somewhere to check or something where like a registry, like you've been served kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think the first step is to look up the person or the law firm that's sending you the letter, make sure they actually exist and things like that. But the next first step really to take would be to speak with a litigation attorney. So there are attorneys that specialize specifically in privacy litigation. So they're able to talk you through what this letter means, what the violation is, help you confirm whether a violation actually took place. So a lot of times what these attorneys in California will do is they have a set of plaintiffs, and then these plaintiffs just go to websites and hope they have Google Analytics on them. And if they do, then boom, here's your letter and here's your violation. So you would have to check and make sure that that technology is actually on your website, that the user did not consent to being tracked. And even if it's not on your website, and even if they didn't consent to be tracked, obviously you would still have to respond to that letter with your response and things like that to help prevent a lawsuit. But the best way to kind of take care of this is to speak to a litigation attorney next, and then see what they recommend, because they're able to give you paths to proceed. Like, how do you fight this letter? Or do you pay this money? Or sometimes the option is to ignore and just hope you don't get sued. But I would definitely speak to a litigation attorney that can help provide you that advice depending on your specific situation.
And thank you for being right as straightforward and human as possible during this time together. I appreciate the flexibility, your personality wise, because this stuff can sound like getting bad news from a doctor. It could sound very, very proper and very too punctual, too dark of a period that you're like, whoa. So I appreciate you kind of making this somewhat easy to consume outside of legalese and all those other different things. So if I'm understanding this right, based on just listening to you and firsthand getting this information, right, make sure that if you're going to target businesses or help businesses, that you have a set of quality privacy compliance for your business, and then either partner with a company like yours, an attorney, legal counsel, to at least make it an option for your customer to purchase this customized, documentation that they need to represent themselves. Don't try to create it for them and charge them for it. They need to get this from a legal expert if you want to dot the I's and cross the T's properly.
Yeah, so the thing that worries me about agencies is that you want to help the client, right?
I'm glad you just said what you said, and I was getting to that point where just level with me, right? But what's really nice about this community and what we do here is people just want to be leveled with, and I'm gonna probably get a little pushback that I'm kind of like tippy-toeing around it, but I'm glad you're about to just unpack the real deal. Could you just give it to us as properly safe as possible, but like let us know if it was your husband or your husband's friend, or like, look, man, if you don't do this right, you're going to get jammed up.
Yeah, so actually back in the day, I used to work at an agency myself. I used to do operations and the books and stuff. And I think agency owners in general, at the end of the day, just want to help people, right? You have these clients that are not necessarily the most tech savvy people. They don't always know what's going on. They don't know what's going on in the internet. They're not necessarily following compliance trends and all this other stuff. What worries me about agencies is that since you want to help the client, you might just be like, sure, I'll pull this template from you for you, or copy and paste this policy, whatever, it's fine. And then the client gets fined or sued. And the first question that comes up is, who wrote this policy? Right? Like, who created this policy? Why didn't this policy have a list of privacy rights that you provide as required by X law? And then the client comes back to you and blames you for it, right? And I think with agencies, there's a couple things to keep in mind. So one, your contract with your clients. I've seen a lot of templated contracts floating around that say agency guarantees that the website is compliant with all applicable laws, rules, regulations. No, that's a terrible, terrible idea, because then you're guaranteeing compliance with privacy laws. You're guaranteeing accessibility compliance. You're guaranteeing HIPAA compliance. You're guaranteeing financial compliance. Like any kind of compliance, you're guaranteeing that if your website contract says that. So first of all, make sure your contracts don't say that. Make sure your contract says you're not responsible for compliance. What we have, and you don't have to use Termageddon to use this, we have a website policies waiver that explains privacy to clients and explains that the client and not the agency is responsible for privacy law compliance. So either using that or having your attorney draft something similar and add it to your contract is a great way to make sure that you are protecting yourself and your agency, because these fines can be so high, you don't want to become responsible for these things.
And that was perfectly the way I was hoping it to be, because I just if I were just to check all the boxes, I would think that that would protect me, where actually it doesn't protect me. It actually just opened up Pandora's box for everybody. Yes. And it's like almost triple fines at that point. So thank you so much for really, that was only pillar one that we went over. And for those that are tuning in, whether you're on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, comment below the takeaway. Comment below any questions. Comment below what aha moment you had on this, because this is a unique topic that is no longer unique in the eyes of agency owners. It may just be unique to you, and that's not good. So let's get into the second pillar here, which is common website privacy pitfalls. And with that being said, the risk that's posed by websites that are using websites that are using improper A2P information collecting techniques, information that they're then using to text out through SMS. Maybe they're using SMS through a SIM card. They're using SMS through a voice over IP provider. They're using a phone number that maybe they don't know the previous history of, right? But they've leased that phone number through that provider because that person said, oh, this number's no good, let me get rid of it. And then it got put back into the cycle. And there's sort of other things that we could unpack here, but could we just unpack to start with the collecting of information for SMS? Because that's like a big thing right now for a lot of people. And you obviously are aware of this, but also is stop enough?
Yeah, so I think the first question that people should ask themselves is, where are you getting this phone number from, right? So for a lot of businesses that are doing things the correct way, it would be from your website, right? So somebody specifically submits their information and agrees to text message marketing on the website. However, there's a whole entire another world out there. And if you're getting as many spam texts a day as me, you probably understand this, where data brokers will sell phone numbers to businesses saying these people have opted in to being contacted via text message marketing. So be very, very careful about using those. I would recommend not using those unless the data broker can show you actual proof that this person has consented to something. I have gotten calls myself where somebody says, hey, do you need Medicare? I'm like, what do you mean, do I need Medicare, right? And number one, I'm not going to buy Medicare from you. I'm just not going to do that. Number two, you're calling somebody where it's totally not relevant to them, right? You just spent all this money calling somebody for something that they could not care less about. And number three, I asked them where they got this data from, and they give me the name of some company that I've never submitted my data to, right? So now I'm really upset. You know what I mean? Now I'm upset. So I think it really depends on where this data is coming from. If this person actually signed up for this on their website, they will not get upset. They're not going to file a complaint. They're not going to report your number because they actually signed up for this and they actually want this. So when it comes to your website, making sure that your policies say that you're going to use this phone number for marketing purposes, marketing messaging purposes, who you're going to be sharing that phone number with in order to send that message, how people can opt in and opt out, and having very clear opt-ins on your website. So for example, if you have a form where somebody submits their number and you ask them to sign up for these messages, make sure that the box is not pre-checked, because that's not actual consent. So actual consent means that a user takes a specific affirmative action to agree to processing of their PII in a particular way. Pre-check boxes, inactivity, all of those things, those don't constitute consent. So making sure that the box is not pre-checked, making sure that it's very clear that this person is signing up for text message marketing. So if I buy shoes online, I may want to sign up for shipping alerts about those shoes, about when they're getting here. That doesn't mean that I'm signing up for text message marketing about other shoes that I might buy again. So making sure that there's a very clear distinction between these things of transactional messages and promotional and marketing messages, and then obviously allowing consumers to actually opt out. There's been a lot of cases by the Federal Trade Commission where people try to opt out and then they're still getting slews of messages or slews of emails, and then they get upset. So I think when it comes to privacy violations, the main thing that we have to keep in mind is, does the customer want this? Do they know that this is happening? And are we doing exactly what they want us to do, right? We don't want it to become an unconscionable, shocking practice to consumers. So if somebody gives you their number, they don't want to get a text message from the business down the street. So don't be sharing that number with other businesses. Just kind of keep basic consumer expectations in mind.
Yeah, I just got a text message from an order that I made. It's a shipping text message. I would personally be annoyed and mad if I started getting the special of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know, like, it's weird. Maybe it's not weird. Maybe I'm just looking at it that way at the moment. But like, I know what I sign up for, whether I sign up for subconsciously paying attention, split in the middle of it, five other things going on. It's just weird how the mind works. Like, I know what I signed up for.
Yeah.
Like, don't make me feel stupid. And when you make me feel stupid, then I'm going to go out to prove a point.
Yeah, exactly. And like, don't send me a text message at 3 a.m. because my phone's gonna go off and wake me up. Just keep in mind, if you were the customer, what would you want to receive? How would you want to be treated? How would you want your PII to be treated? And just do it that way. Don't try to overload somebody with 30 messages in a day, because they're not going to buy from you and they're going to unsubscribe and they're going to stop those messages, and you're not going to win the customer anyway.
And this stuff, yes. Absolutely. And there's so many different angles to go. I don't want to go too deep in the weeds on this, but how does somebody in the agency shoes go about documenting these blatant styles of ignoring the advice? Or how does an agency protect themselves with their clients? Or if they're a SaaS agency with their sub accounts, that they have other agencies or other marketers under their license of high level, how do they go about to put some strikes in place or notifications? You get some advice on that.
So I think it can be difficult because you can't necessarily shove this down a customer's throat, right? So if you explain everything to the client's like, yeah, I don't care, I don't want this. Your job is to just explain this and get it in writing. And if they don't want it, that's on them. So my first recommendation is to get it in writing. So for example, let's say the client says, okay, I would love to collect phone numbers for text message marketing through this form. Okay, my next step would be, all right, what kind of consent would you like for this form? and they say, well, I don't want any consent, I would say, well, I would recommend making sure that you meet these rules. I would definitely recommend having consent on this form. And then the client says, no, I don't want it. Well, that's your evidence, right? So if your client later comes back and blames you and says, well, you never told me, here's the email printout, exhibit A, I did actually tell you about this, even though it wasn't my job to tell you because I'm not responsible for privacy compliance on your website, but I did everything that I can do, right? When it comes to having, sub accounts or sub licensing, it would be good to have a clear set of rules. A lot of companies will do a data processing agreement. So you can find a lot of templates but only from specific places. So I recommend the template from the European Commission or the United Kingdom's Information Commissioner's Office. So those are regulators that provide data processing agreement templates. So those are actually rules as to how certain data will be processed, meaning like you need to let me know of a data breach within 24 hours, or you can't share data with these people, or these are the only people that you can share it with, things like that. And just kind of having that set of rules, have them sign those rules and say, okay, I'm agreeing to this. And then, if they don't do what they're supposed to do, that's on them.
Could you talk about as we pivot here a little bit, we touched on A2P. If you start noticing below the chats blowing up, A2P in the internet agency world is like a love-hate relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
You love it because you got approved, you hate it because you're 5 attempts in, 15 attempts in. So
Yeah.
please don't let the comments below throw you off. This is just right the world that agency owners, SaaS owners are living in at the moment. It's adapting. We're all adapting, right? We're learning the rules and making those adjustments. You mentioned, and again, CIPA, right, can mean a lot of different things. Could you share a little bit of what that stands for, what that means, and why it's so important, whether you are aware of it or not?
Yeah, absolutely. So really quickly, just one comment going back to A2P. A lot of the approval processes for A2P are very frivolous. The standards make no sense. I know that a lot of the standards follow privacy laws that apply to giant companies only and don't apply to most companies that would be using A2P like small businesses. So I think they use automated software to scan policies, and the standards that they set for the automated software are, I would say, questionable. So for a lot of these providers, it's very difficult to get approval because the standards are bizarre, for what it's worth. Now, CIPA, the California Invasion of Privacy Act, old privacy law, was actually created for eavesdropping on landline phones. That's how old it is. It's a Cold War era law, which is kind of funny to think about. But what some crafty attorneys have done is they brought forth some cases, and the courts decided that this ancient law will apply to websites now, because they've decided that how a consumer uses a website, so for example, like what pages they clicked on, what videos they watched, can be considered a communication between a website and a resident of California. Now, what that means is that a lot of websites that use Google Analytics, Metapixel, chatbots, IP intelligence tools without the user's consent have been sued for violations of this law. Now, the lawsuits, 10,000 to 100,000, huge range depending on the size of the business, the different types of violations. But we've seen very small businesses getting sued, from like one-person shops to huge corporations. They're just kind of suing everybody under the sun. And the standard with that is that a user from California needs to consent prior to being tracked with those tools. So that's why we're seeing cookie consent banners, which, nobody likes, but it is what it is, that stop those tools from firing until the user actually clicks accept. Now, one thing that I would caution for agencies to do is to ask themselves and their clients whether their client actually needs these tools. So, we all love analytics, right? As agency owners, analytics, awesome. But if you have a client that doesn't even know how to sign into their analytics account, has never looked at this data, will never look at this data, doesn't care about any of it, I would definitely urge you to remove analytics or these tools from the website if they're not needed, just because they're so high risk, especially if the client's not going to use it.
And there that'll also create some commentary below. And I understand why. It's starting to click for me. And if it's not clicking for those of you in the audience, because everyone's at a different level, everyone's looking at it from a different lens, um, do a little bit of research and see the cases that are out now online, the examples that are out there. Go to Google News and type in privacy lawsuits, and you'll start to see other stories. And that this episode and those real stories will fill the gap. So please, just understand that, Donata here is just being very gracious with her forwardness and her expertise. But then again, it's up to you to, connect the dots on this stuff. And I appreciate you breaking this down in depth. And again, this is like we're just scraping the surface right now. I do want to touch on before we go to this third pillar. Talk about this AI revolution, this AI forward thinking, this AI tools in many different forms from ChatGPT from its different versions, chatbots, conversations that happen through chat, and then the errors, maybe the wrong things that are said in chat. Could you touch on a little bit of sprinkle of everything as much as possible before we jump to the next pillar here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, AI is really cool, right? Like I've played around with it too. I use it sometimes to write notes to people or help me kind of revise a paragraph or something like that. It's a cool tool, and I don't discourage people from trying it. I do want to caution people in the sense that anything that you put into that AI tool can then be used for the AI tool to learn, and then can be used in responses to other people. So let's say you're putting client PII in there, you're putting their email or their phone number, that could potentially end up as an answer for somebody else.
Huh.
So it could lead to breaches of PII because then it's all owned by them, right? I don't have to tell coders about this, but if you input code into the AI now essentially owns that code. So, it could lead to copyright, trademark infringement, and all of that other stuff. And then I think in terms of the use of AI and making sure to disclose that to consumers. So if you have an AI chatbot on the website, when the chatbot first opens up, I would encourage you to say this chatbot is artificial intelligence and not human. Maybe not in those words, make it sound nicer. I don't know. I'm not a web designer, but inform the consumer that you're using AI, and inform the website owner that you're using AI as well, if that's what you're doing. So if you're using AI to write copy for the website, make sure that the website owner approves this, because it could be copyright infringement, because you might be using that copy written by AI without a license to use it. It may include paragraphs written by other people that they've put into AI, things like that. So be very careful with it.
And I appreciate you, without scaring, the socks off here, just right being like if we were, at a holiday dinner, or we were, out and about, just, hey, I got a quick question for you. Like you just kind of expressing it as direct, but right, not to discourage anybody. This is just what you gotta know the right questions to ask to get the answers
Yeah.
you need to move forward. So if for everyone here in the audience, thank you for putting yourself as the potential client, right? And as the student, because there's a lot that we don't know until we figure out either the hard way or someone shares it um, in a way to be easily consumed. Let's hit to this third and final pillar, which is protecting your agency and creating these opportunities to educate, but also attach a revenue stream to it, not just to make money, but to facilitate the relationship with the expert, and then be able to hold the customer accountable to follow through with what the expert needs to do their job, along with what you need to do yours.
Mm-hmm.
And starting off with, how can agencies protect themselves from the liability and turning these privacy compliance into a healthy way of investing in their business's future?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did kind of touch on this before, where, check your contracts. Make sure that your contract's not saying that you're responsible for privacy law compliance. Have the website policies waiver or something similar that tells the client that it's their responsibility to make sure that the website is compliant. whether that's with privacy laws, accessibility, anything else that applies to the website. And then in terms of, not just protecting yourself, but talking to your clients about this, I don't think you need to be a privacy lawyer or a privacy expert or know the name of every single privacy law or what all the acronyms mean. I think it's more of just a matter of, hey, your website has analytics, it has advertising pixel, it has these forms. Your website is collecting PII. That PII is protected under a number of privacy laws, and you need to have a privacy policy. And you should also consider having a cookie consent banner on your website, right? And whether you recommend somebody or leave it up to your client, I think that part is the most important part of just telling your client, hey, I'm not a privacy lawyer, but I know this exists. I know this can affect your website or your business. You should definitely look into this. Now, in terms of how to, make this into a revenue opportunity, there's a couple of ways to do that. So first of all, regardless of where your client gets policies from, you're probably going to have to put those policies on the website. So you're going to have to create a privacy policy page and put the privacy policy on there, the terms, the cookie policy. You're going to have to add the cookie consent banner code or the plugin. So number one, charging for your time to do this. So, if it takes an hour for you to put everything on the site, test it, make sure everything appears correctly, make sure to charge for that time. And then if you do decide to work with a website policies generator like us, a lot of generators do have affiliate or referral programs where agencies can make recurring revenue, whether through giving their client an affiliate code, and then you get commission when that client purchases and whenever their license renews, or you can buy licenses at a wholesale rate and then resell them to your clients at a retail rate and pocket the difference. It kind of depends on the generator, what program they're offering, but that's probably the best way to make more recurring revenue from this as well.
And I appreciate you sharing that because, I feel like, as we're evolving in this internet product stage of AI and everything easily accessible and, digital products becoming more appreciated for what the value they bring and how they help businesses grow. Having a service like this that you could either deploy and say, hey, this is who we use. This is, this is our affiliate code and feel free to take advantage of this. And then we can help you implement it on your site is one way. But outside of that, at what point, based on your expertise, experience, and professional, what you've observed throughout your career, at what point should you be prepared to subscribe to some sort of attorney service or part, like how do you go about finding the right attorney to work with you for this internet stuff? Because not all attorneys are equal with the knowledge, but also how much resources they can commit to this.
Absolutely. So I think when you first start a business, regardless of whether you're selling things online, let's say you're getting just a website up, it's a brochure website, you're starting a business, you're offering goods or services there, but maybe people can't buy from you from the site. They have to pay separately or something like that, or they come into your office to pay you. You want to think about incorporation or forming an LLC at this point, registering with your state, registering to pay taxes and things like that. And then in terms of internet issues, it kind of depends on what you're doing, right? So if your website is collecting personal information, that's when you start thinking about having a privacy policy. If your website is tracking people through cookies, that's when you think about the cookie consent banner. Now, if your website is hosting videos that are uploaded by other people, that's when you want to think about copyrights. When you're selling things on the website, like let's say you're selling widgets through an e-commerce store, that's when you want to think about, products compliance. You want to think about tax compliance and things like that. So a lot of people will assume, okay, I'm forming an online business in Illinois. I'm registered in Illinois. I pay taxes in Illinois. I don't need to worry about anything else. But that's actually not true. Like there's standards for taxes. So if you make a certain amount from a particular state, you have to pay taxes there now, right? You have to register with that state, pay taxes, file all these forms, which are like the bane of my existence. But things like that. This is where you have to start thinking about things. It all depends on the nature of your business and what stage you're in. You're hiring people. Let's say I'm in Illinois, I hire somebody from Texas. even though they're working online. I need to comply with Texas employment laws. So it really just depends on your budget, the time in your business that you're in. A lot of times these things will start applying much sooner than you want them to, right? But that's just how it goes.
And I appreciate you, really unpacking this third pillar. Um, as much as you've done, it's opened up my eyes tremendously. It's I got a bunch of ideas here that I'm trying to find a way that we could, best position this type of education um, to those that may never ever see this, right? Unless they have an emergency or they do a Google search or they look up something on YouTube. So, for audience that's commenting below, thank you for participating. Thank you for helping the algorithm recognize that this is important. And for others, if you're going to share this with somebody, we appreciate that also. Bernard, it's been a pleasure to have you here today. And I want to thank you so much for just sharing your expertise and insights without sending an invoice, without, making me
Oh,
sign
that's
a long
coming
form,
later.
without me signing a long form contract and, going through a bunch of red lines and really just making this very complicated. So thank you so much. And it's clear that you've jumped on here because you want people to know that data privacy is not just necessary as a legal requirement, but it's also an important opportunity for agencies to enhance their trust with their clients and to keep them safe, their business safe, their clients, families, and those around them safe by doing the right thing the right way, not based on feeling or moral, the
Mhm.
LAW, right? The intent, after a certain age, intent really doesn't matter anymore. It's not, what you thought or what you confused, especially in business. It's like, look, you should have known better and you know the route that you should have taken, whether you did or not. So this
Yeah.
is like that forced education at you. Donato, before we wrap up here, do you have any final thoughts or advice, or not, let me scratch that advice out, right? Take that part out. Do you have any final thoughts or opinions you'd like to share for agencies working to prioritize this now? Now, like, holy smokes, this was this was the perfect timing. This was meant to be for me to watch this. What do I do now? Can you share some of that maybe next step or idea or advice, opinion on what you would do?
Absolutely. So I think the next step would be to determine what you want to recommend to your clients, right? Do you want to recommend them to talk to a lawyer, to use a website policies generator like us, or do anything else, right? Because you have to send your clients somewhere. If you tell them, oh, this is important, the next question is going to be like, well, how do I do this, right? Have something in mind as to how they should do this, and then just create a plan to communicate it with them. This is something that's relatively new. So nobody's going to blame you for not talking about this 10 years ago, because this wasn't a big deal 10 years ago. It's just coming up as a bigger and bigger issue today. So don't be worried kind of going back to this and saying, well, should I tell them sooner? Well, telling them now is better than never telling them. And just kind of create a strategy as to how you want to communicate this to your clients. And if you are going to work with a third party provider on this, a lot of them, including us, have resources for your clients like pre-written emails, presentations, forms that they can fill out, and things like that. So that's probably going to be the next step that you should think about.
Absolutely. And Donato, thank you again for all these insights. And it's been fantastic just hanging out with you. I really don't get a chance to hang out with the lawyers, often just on a quick podcast. Everyone's got things to do, and this is one of those impromptu moments that you take it for what it's what you're given, and you have fun while you're doing it.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you. For our listeners, I hope this spotlight session highlighted the importance, and I hope it gave you a little bit of goosebumps. It maybe put a little pit in your stomach. Maybe it woke you up for a quick second. I'm sorry that had to be from Donata and I at this moment, but it'd rather be us than anybody else. And just don't avoid this or ignore it. Put a plan in place, be aware of it, make documentation, put it on your to-do list. But at the end of the day, we appreciate you tuning in, learning with us. And if you found this helpful and you're not even a high-level user yet, or you just like, where did this come from? And this education and these experts and all these great things, subscribe below, learn more, stay compliant, stay proactive. Donato, I got nothing else on my end. It was such a blast. Like if I had another excuse or reason just to hang out here, I would do it. But I know we got to get things done. Thank you so
Yeah,
much. I
thank
usually
you
do
so
like this
much.
fist pound. It's a little fist poundage there for you.
There you go.
And till next time, we'll see you then.